friends. We are streaming live, and this is Chelsea Collie here. Welcome back to my channel. I just want to make sure we are live and kicking. Yep, we are. All right, so let me get out of this screen here just a second here. There you go. Now I see you, Paul. Okay, so we are in for a huge treat today, and I am so excited. This is probably the most important episode I've ever done to date. The information we're going to go through, and you are in for a huge treat. I have actually met Paul. Paul is actually co-founder of a $48 billion hedge fund. That is billion with a B. And his heart is in the right place. And I'm so honored to be able to feature Paul Hutchinson. Welcome.
Thank you, Chelsea. Honored to be here with you and your audience.
Well, we're very blessed, and we appreciate you taking time out of your schedule. You said you had like 7 recordings today. So thanks for taking the time with us today.
You betcha. Anything to get the message of light, love, and hope and healing to the world.
Awesome. So I appreciate you being here, and we did actually meet in person. Do you remember meeting me, Paul?
I've met millions of people in the last 10 plus years. Was it in Florida?
It was actually at Atlantis in the Bahamas.
Oh,
with a private global mastermind with Bill Walsh.
That's right. It was. Yeah. Bill actually helped me go public before anybody. This is while I was still undercover.
Right.
He had me coming and speaking. Yeah. He had me speaking at some of his events back then. So yeah, you guys got to hear the stories way before the rest of the world did.
I was one of the lucky 20 people in the world to be in that room that day, and you blew our minds. I mean, we were all excited for you to come in and talk about your then $12 billion hedge fund. And we're like, oh my God, we're going to hear about like how he did this. This is so incredible. And, you know, you came in and you're like, yeah. This is not how it went really, but you're like, I did that hedge fund. But what's really most important to me is rescuing these kids. And you told us about your experiences. And I got to say, I know this guy, Paul Hutchinson, is kind of coming up out of nowhere, and you may not have heard of him before, but I met him 5 years ago in 2018. And I got to say, you were telling the same stories that you're telling now.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, you got to hear the story of the rescue of Sound of Freedom way back before anybody even read the script. So good for you. Yeah, that was beautiful.
And I had no idea it was a movie at that time. I assumed it was going to be a series.
Well, a lot of people want to do series with, I've led or played a key part in over 70 undercover rescue missions. And it's not just about me. There's lots of Navy SEALs, Green Berets, amazing men and women who were part of that first rescue mission that the movie was about, and then have continued for many, many years in leading undercover rescues and finding these kids and eradicating trafficking. So there's a lot of stories. In fact, a lot of those rescue missions were more dangerous than the one in Colombia that we made the movie about. So there's a lot more going on, a lot more kids that were rescued for sure. Oh,
sorry. So how many rescues have you been part of now, Paul?
A little over 70. Every time we go in and count, we're like, oh, wow, we forgot about that one. And so we add one to it. So about 70 undercover rescue missions in 15 countries over the last 10 years.
Thank you so much for your very, very important work. I've heard you say that. And then I also heard you say sometimes you'd have to go like 5 or 6 times, with just one job. So are you counting those?
Yeah.
5
so actually, the 70,
no,
the actual rescues themselves, many times what we'll have to do is go in multiple times, sometimes up to 8, even one was 12 different times where we went in because we wanted to cut the head off the dragon. We wanted to get to the boss's boss. We wanted to make sure that we took down all the trafficking in a specific city or region before we did the sting. And otherwise, it just pops back up the next week. And so when I say 70, those were separate times going in undercover, but not all of them. Some of them were 5 or 6 of them as part of one sting operation.
So you really went on like hundreds and hundreds of trips.
Yeah. Well, no, it was probably close to 100, 150 trips of 70 individual things to do one specific rescue mission. So,
and you've been doing this for
10 years
9
now.
years?
Yeah, about 9.5 years. In fact, the first one was 2013, so almost exactly 10 years ago.
Okay.
And that was the one that the movie was about. In fact, that one was that call that I got from the Attorney General and then the Homeland Security agent asking me if I would be willing to come to Colombia, not only to help to fund that rescue, but to play that role of the wealthy buyer of the kids. And so in the movie, my role is Pablo. Halfway through, when the Homeland Security agent's like, okay, I need to convince Pablo that I can have him help to fund it and come down here, then I can quit my job, make it work. And that was my role in the movie. Understand that just like his role and other ones, Jim Caviezel's role and even my character's role, there were multiple people that came together to make that happen. It wasn't just me that helped to fund that mission. And it wasn't just it wasn't just him that went on all of those rescues. There was multiple people that contributed to a lot of the things that we had to bring together into one or two or three or 10 different roles in the movie itself.
And so so you had to combine different rescues to come up with a solid storyline for the movie. So how many rescues were combined?
We figured that it was about 8 different ones. I mean, for example, Vampiro in the movie, we call him Batman. His real name is Steve. He wasn't involved in the rescue mission that on the island. And he wasn't involved in the one in the jungle either. Those were separate. But he's definitely a real person and was involved in some of the early rescues, and a lot of how he came into doing that work was depicted in the movie. The little boy that came across the border, his sister wasn't the one in Colombia. They were totally separate. In fact, that was years apart in those ones, but he really did get taken in coming across the border. There was other people that were involved with that. And then of course the jungle itself was in a whole different country and an entirely different team than what was depicted in the movie as well.
And you also mentioned Rocio was actually at the party, so the jungle was a separate mission.
Yeah.
What about the fight scene, Paul? The fight scene at the end?
No, nobody shot at me. I actually went in dressed as a doctor. There was multiple operations where different people went in to get into some of these regions as a doctor. That nobody was ever shot at in those. Nobody was ever killed in those. But that was actually in Haiti that I participated in. There were other countries and other operators who went in similar roles and dressed like doctors, et cetera. So there's a lot of different undercover stuff that we did to be able to get in and find out where the kids were. And but we have had some violence in some of our rescue missions. We had one of our operators that got stabbed 27 times in Dominican Republic in one of the operations, and we have other ones who have been killed. And so we had
he lived.
Yeah, and we have traffickers, multiple traffickers who have died on these missions. Most of them were actually killed by other traffickers. And so, they have these little turf war type things and whatever. And so we've had multiple situations where the traffickers were taken out by other traffickers. So yes, that kind of thing happens, but that was all just brought into the movie to show how dangerous it really is in some of these situations.
Great. Okay. Well, I did want to do a little kind of intro, but is it okay if I go ahead and ask my questions now?
You can ask whatever you want, Chelsea.
Okay. I just want to try to get through these questions kind of quickly. That way we can get on to the more important love and light stuff. Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay. So you did mention that, you split bays with Tim Ballard like 5 years ago. And the most important thing, like the biggest question for everybody is, what about the aftercare for these children? Like, what happened to the children that were rescued in regards to their aftercare? Were they taken care of?
Yes.
Or not?
Yeah. Every country that we went in, we wouldn't do the operation until there was aftercare set up. And so a lot of the foundations that I've helped to fund and been a part of have had aftercare within the foundation itself. Other ones, they work with NGOs within each country that they make sure that they have all of the beds that they need, the therapists that they need, et cetera. Now, if the parents reported the children abducted, then it's easy to identify them and get them back. If they didn't, sometimes the parents were involved. Like in Southeast Asia, more than half the children that we rescued were sold by their own families. It's also important to understand that a very large percentage of children that are sold for sex sleep in their own beds at night. Now, this surprises a lot of people because they think that, watching Sound of Freedom, that trafficking is some, family that's a healthy family, and the child is taken and put in a container ship and taken to another country. That happens. That has happened in some of the children in some of these situations, but that's not the norm. The norm in terms of children that are being picked up and sold and take to other places is children within a broken foster care program, or runaways, or in broken families, et cetera. We've had a lot of kids that have come out of broken families that they've been groomed by these traffickers and then sold. There's a lot more that, like I say, sleep in their own beds at night. It's their babysitters, it's their uncle, it's their cousin, it's even their mom or dad that are selling these children, that are making money from selling them for these services. And so in that kind of a situation, we have to make an assessment. Do the parents know what's going on? We had one in Acapulco, where this little 13-year-old, she was being babysat by her aunt, and her aunt was showing her pornography, desensitizing her, was connected with the traffickers. And she told this little 13-year-old, she said, "Hey, you're gonna lose your virginity anyway sometime. If you lose it to a rich American, you can make a few $100s." And they were charging us thousands of dollars. The mom had no idea what was going on, but this is typical in a lot of cases. And so in that kind of a situation, of course, we make sure that the aunt is in prison. We make sure that the mom has all of the therapy and psychological care for the daughter set up, and she's back into a healthy home fairly quickly. But that's the norm. If the kids are coming from a foster program or whatever else, and we can't put them back in a broken system, they go into safe houses, and those safe houses have therapists, and they're away from the big cities and the traffickers, et cetera. In fact, one of the best ones that I love is the Hope of Life Foundation. They're out of Guatemala. They have helped thousands and thousands of victims recover. And their model is beautiful. They have a property that's got a ranch and a farm and greenhouses that's way away from the city. And they build these small homes for families. And they'll bring in a family that's too poor to pay for their own place to live, but maybe one or two kids. And they'll say, "Listen, we're going to give you a home and a job and 3 or 4 more kids." So that way, these children that were trafficked or in broken foster programs and whatnot now have a family with the hospital there and the therapist there, et cetera, that can help them recover and heal through all of the trauma. So, there's a lot going on, a lot of moving parts, but the short answer is yes. That's the most important part. Pulling the children out of hell, that's the easy part. The hard part, the real rescue, happens after we put them into a safe environment.
Okay, so sometimes they're going to, or probably, is it sometimes or usually they're going to a safe house in that area? Or are you bringing the kids back to the States?
No, very seldom do they come back to the States, unless they were taken from a home in the States or whatnot. Most of them are stay in that area in a safe house that's there, that is sponsored by either the government in that area or an NGO that we trust and we can work with. So that's more of the norm. It's very seldom that you're going to find a U.S. child that's come from a wealthy family or whatever. We have had U.S. children in some of these that we came across in these rescue operations that came from a broken family or were a runaway or something like that as well.
Okay, so I wanted to ask, what if the parents had sold them? But you pretty much asked that question. Are they being cared for? Yes, and okay, so this is kind of my main concern. So I've dove in, I've been shouting from the rooftops ever since I saw you 5 years ago, right? About the kids, and I am definitely like a child advocate. So in 2020 is when I really started, learning about kind of like the truth and the darkness and the horrors. I mean, I knew human trafficking existed, but I didn't know that it was worse now than ever before in history. And so making all those realizations, and then like ever since this movie come out, like very much in support of it. And I wanted it to come out 3 years ago, and I didn't even know that you were connected to it up until when you went public. But okay, so there are a lot of media outlets and a lot of fake reports and a lot of stuff being said, and there's a lot of deep, dark rabbit holes, and I've been down some of them. And it just seems like the media is like doing low blows, and a lot of it is just garbage and BS. But a lot of them aren't, I feel like, talking about the real issues, which is like goes down to the funding. I mean, you mentioned Carlos Slim. So there are concerns for like my audience, an awake audience that's, looked into kind of like what the elites and the control system has been up to with the World Economic Forum, the Rothschilds, and he's linked to both of those. He's linked with Emilio Salinas, son of former Mexican president, who's linked to the Nexium sex cult. There's allegations that he's linked to cartels, linked to drugs. There's pictures of him dancing with Hillary Clinton. You know all this, but considering that, and I know that you were the first money in, you funded the pre-production, but considering that, why even accept money to fund The Sound of Freedom from someone like Carlos Slim or the Carlos Slim family?
Yeah, it's a valid question. Okay. Eduardo Verástegui is the producer of the Sound of Freedom. In fact, he was the one that plays me in the film, and he had relationships with a lot of wealthy families, including the Waltons, the Walmart family, who put some money in, and the Slim family. It wasn't Carlos himself. I have never met Carlos Slim. I think it was his nephew, Patrice. I'm not sure exactly where the money came. It came from a member of the Slim family, but the people that I met when we were in Mexico, introduced by Eduardo, were good people. They were good people. Now, I know there's crap in every family, right? And I 100% agree with you that there are bad actors that go all the way to the top when it comes to some of these ultra wealthy families. I will say, though, that there are a lot of good people in the world who have money. Not everybody that has money is bad. I speak at a lot of these family office conferences with these billionaire families that have good hearts and are contributing everything they can to make a positive impact in the world. And I know that all of them have some bad apples in their family somewhere, whether it's the original father that put together the money, whether it was, one of the kids, the apple that fell off the tree, whatever it was. Everybody has free choice. Now, I know that there's allegations out there. I'm not going to stand on one side or the other when it comes to Carlos, when it comes to any of these wealthy families, unless I have seen it firsthand. There are things that I have seen firsthand, and I have zero tolerance for people who would use their power and their influence to subjugate other people and to bring about pain in the lives of others. I will fight that tooth and nail. I will fight slavery in all forms, not just slavery of the children, but slavery in all forms. And I agree with you. There are a lot of very, very powerful people in this world who, a lot of them are behind your Hollywood movies. A lot of them are in big, very high-level government positions. A lot of them have multi-generational billionaire checkbooks that they're using that are doing some horrible things, that are using that to control your minds, to control your lives, to take away your freedoms. In fact, the sound of freedom should not just be the joyous sound of the children as they're being liberated in Colombia. The sound of freedom should be a war cry for all of us to step forth and say, no, we're not going to stand for it. We're not going to allow ourselves to have our rights and our freedoms being taken away just because somebody has power over our media, just because somebody has a really big checkbook, just because somebody's been put into a political position that they may or may not have earned. Those are all things that, as we take a step back, the grassroots movement of the Sound of Freedom is proof that you and I, as good people everywhere, can get behind a movement like this and say, no, we're not going to sit back and allow big Hollywood to decide what we can and can't see. We're going to decide what we're going to be able to see. We're going to decide what we're going to promote to other people. So that's how I feel about it. I think that, you know, some people may look at me as one of those ultra elite. No, these guys have billions and billions at their disposal. I've built a very successful company, and I'm very blessed in that, but I'm very fortunate that my family and my relationship with God and with Jesus is one that helps me stay humble in all that I do and understand that these are all blessings and gifts that allow me to expand this mission of helping humanity heal from this toxic world that we find ourselves in.
Okay. So, I mean, pretty much it came from one of the family members, and that was like something like Patrick or Patricio Slim Domi, something like that. He's
and I met him once. I can't vouch for him one way or the other. You know, okay. I was down there with Eduardo and with Tim and others, and they were all speaking Spanish. My Spanish sucks, so I don't know. All I know that I was physically there and met them, and they seemed like good people. But the reality is, I mean, just like there's some random guy who was caught kidnapping or whatever last week that the media is all over saying, you know, this guy is one of the funders of the Sound of Freedom. Well, guess what? There was over 7,000 people that were close to 7,000 people that were part of that crowdfunding that donated
to a crowd fund.
Yeah, exactly.
I caught that right away. I caught that right away.
And the reality is, even if, let's say, even if there was somebody that was part of the funding originally with me and others with the Sound of Freedom, let's say it was Carlos himself, and let's say that Carlos was doing all these super horrible things, right? Even if, then great. Let's take the money of people that are doing like stuff like that. He wasn't involved in the production itself or anything. You know, it was an investment because he had a relationship with the producer, period, right? Great. Let's turn their money into something good. Any of these families, if you're looking at them saying, hey, they're doing horrible things, great. Let's take part of their money and turn it into something good, because they're probably not paying attention to the details of whatever they're investing in and donating to. So there's good in the world, and it's not just, oh, this is dirty money, it's a dirty project. No, this is an amazing project. And it's a project that is bringing about light and truth and love, regardless of the lack of integrity of some of the people that have been involved in the movie. Now, I'll tell you straight out, the lack of integrity is not just some random guy at the bottom that donated $1,000 or $100 or whatever else. There's a very likely lack of integrity all the way up to the top with some of the people that were investing or part of the movie. And that's okay, right? God wins always. It's people sit back and say, oh, Judas betrayed Christ, and so the whole thing is evil. Guess what? Christ allowed that to happen, right? And so all of these bad people with bad intentions, they'll push their things forward, and God will turn them around into something beautiful. And that's how we have to see it.
Is evil going to be exposed in this process?
Yes, I believe very firmly that this movie coming out marks the beginning of a transition. I believe that we are right on the cusp of a global transformation. And this isn't the new world order that some people want to create. This is a transformation for good. This is an exposing of the darkness that has been plaguing us. And it starts with bringing to light this child trafficking thing that nobody even knew that existed. You know, when I was living this life completely oblivious to this crap. But when I saw this firsthand, it changed everything. It opened my eyes not just to what was going on in child trafficking, but it opened my eyes to all kinds of darkness that I was oblivious to. And so it transformed me personally in seeing that firsthand. And I believe that that's what's going to happen globally as we move forward into this global transformation, and people saying, you know what, I'm sick and tired of being controlled by the media, by Hollywood, by all of these people that are trying to create this mass psychosis into our homes, into our minds, and leading us down this road of slavery. So yes, I believe some beautiful things are happening, and as part of that, evil will be exposed on all levels.
I think everybody can feel your legitimacy and your heart in that. I have one more question.
Sure.
Okay. Are you a Knights Templar?
I was knighted by the Knights Templar. I was also knighted by Prince Lorenzo di Medici in Rome. And when I was asked if I would accept that honor, I looked into it a bunch, because a lot of people are like, oh, they're tied into these different cult organizations, or they're the part of the Masons or whatever. And if you look back in history, there was clear separations. I will say this, and this is very important to understand. I swear my allegiance to God and Christ alone, not to any man, not to any special signs and whatever else. And as I looked back into the history, a lot of history is rewritten by people who don't want that history to be known. Okay. The history of the Knights Templar goes way back, even before the early 1200s. In the early days, they were an organization that was set up to protect the traveling Christians, because they were being persecuted and they were being robbed and attacked in so many ways. And so they were there as a protection of that which was good, as kind of like what I do undercover. People will look at that and say, okay, Paul, when you're undercover, you look like a trafficker. Yep, I do. It's that old story of the sheep and the wolf and the sheepdog, right? There's plenty of sheep that put their head in the sand and they just pretend like nothing's going on. And then there's the wolves that would destroy the innocence of those sheep. And they would be relentless in doing so unless something stood in their way. And what stands in the way of that evil is the sheepdog. And that's how I see myself. In fact, you look behind me right here. I've got an American flag and I've got a knight kneeling. Why is he kneeling? Is he kneeling because he's, going to do some dark things? No, he's kneeling to God. And that's where he puts his allegiance. And that's how I live my life. And so, yes, there are people in all kinds of military orders and others that are not in integrity. But for me in my life, I saw it as an honor to be put in that same area as a lot of my ancestors. I can trace my ancestry right back to Sir William Wallace. If you watch the movie Braveheart, he's directly through my grandmother's side. He actually had a child with the princess. And so, he was knighted, as was a lot of the great warriors for peace and light and truth throughout history. And so that's my long answer to was I knighted.
Okay, just a quick follow-up.
Sure.
Thank you for clarifying that. I have actually heard that Knights Templar is actually good. But okay, so there's an article, Templar Times, and a lot of the rabbit holes that have the information about Sound of Freedom have this article, and it's like Templar Times, and it names you. It names Tim Ballard, and it names Sean Reyes. all had a ritual ceremony together, some sort of initiation, maybe Knights Templar related. Is that accurate?
Yeah. We were all identified as by the Knights Templar as people who had contributed to good in the world. And so the knighting ceremony is it's beautiful. It's it's not some weird, making promises to whatever else. It's they have a sword where you get on your knee and they tap you on your shoulder and say you promise your dedication to God and to doing good in the world and making a positive impact in the lives of others. I have to read all the details of it, but it's more of a dedication of your life to doing good. And yeah, all three of us were there on the same day in Knighthood.
Okay, great. Well, now we know what's real and what's fake. So
exactly.
What can we talk about?
Whatever you want.
We talk about, I loved how your explanation of the vacuum, and then the if you had a time machine, what happens when you're rescuing these kids. Would you mind talking about that?
Absolutely.
And, I loved how you talk about breaking generational abuse.
So in the last 10 years, I made a commitment 10 years ago on that first rescue mission when I'm sitting on this chair and the traffickers are presenting these virgins scared to death, these little kids. And I'm sitting looking at that little girl, the one that they called Princess in the movie. We named her Rocio. We named her that because my wife at the time was named Rocio, right? So we named her after, because that's what changed my life, is that little girl. And standing in front of me, scared to death, I made a commitment to myself, to God, and to that child that I would do everything in my power to eradicate that evil from the face of the earth. And so I then dedicated my resources and my time and even my life to helping to fight this evil, and made that decision. I was going to eradicate child trafficking. My lifetime, that was my goal. And last year I looked at the numbers and I realized there's more children being sold today than there was 10 years ago. And if my goal was to eradicate child trafficking, I wasn't doing a very good job, because there's more now than ever. And I thought, how do I fix this? How do I fix this? If that's what my goal is, and going undercover is not fixing it. And I realized that the problem was the demand side. Because if you pull 20 kids out of hell, get them back to their families, and if you haven't fixed the demand, then somehow those traffickers, whatever, they're going to figure a way to supply that demand. And so we've got to fix that side. And for a long time, I thought that the demand was coming from men who were addicted to pornography. And now everybody listening to me has seen pornography. Just because you've seen it doesn't mean you're going to go become a pedophile. But every one of these guys they started out with a hardcore addiction to pornography. And when you take a woman from a divine feminine to an object, you start going down a dark road. And when you're objectifying women, or you're seeing sexual intimacy as something that is, debasing, like a lot of pornography is, then some of them get addicted and they need something harder to have that same fix. And pretty soon, for some of them, harder is a little bit younger. Pretty soon they're fantasizing about things they wouldn't have even thought was attractive 5 years ago. And that's but I realized that even that is a symptom of something much bigger and much worse. And the symptom is, for a lot of people, it's generational trauma. 40% of all women who are listening to us right now, 40% or more, I've realized the number's a lot higher when we're doing some of these healing retreats with these women. But statistically, they're saying about 40% of all women have been a victim of sexual violence at some point in their life. And of them, there's about 1/4 of all women, about 1 billion women on this planet, who being a victim of sexual violence happened when they were a child. And so and most of them grow up to some of them low self-esteem and anxiety and depression and whatnot. Some of them, they grow up and God bless them, they're able to let it go and work through that. But unfortunately, especially in the men, and there's hundreds of millions of men who have been raped as children, most of them in their own home. 1/3 of them grow up to be contact offenders. And what we can do, we have a couple choices. Okay, let's find that 1/3 and let's just arrest 1/3 of the planet, right? No. What we need to do is come from a place of compassion. Now, once somebody has hurt a child, I'm going to do everything in my power to ensure they never hurt innocents again. And if they're even close to that, we need to make sure that they never cross that line. But what if we could catch them before they get addicted to child pornography, before they start looking at children in that way, before they ever have sexual or physical abuse against a woman or another person? What if we can help them heal from their own trauma before they ever pass that trauma on to somebody else? That's what liberating humanity is all about, is figuring out how to help us all heal, because every one of us needs to in some way. Every one of us. Every single person has had something that they have done or something that has been done to them that was not in line with what God wants, that was not full of integrity, that caused pain in the lives of somebody else in some way. So if we can take a step back and say, okay, those things that happened to me do not define me. That happened to me when I was 8 years old. It doesn't mean that I'm a dirty person. You know, I was not to blame in any way because I was a child at the time, and I don't have to hold that. And I can change my negative habit patterns of thought of when I look in the mirror and I see something dirty or see something that was being used. Realize that every single cell in your body is brand new after a couple of years. If these things happened to you 5 years ago, there is nothing physically on your body that's the same as what was defiled at that time. Nothing. The only thing that's being held on to is our minds and our emotions, and we're holding on to all of that pain. So if we can help people release that pain through meditation, through breath work, through plant medicine, through counseling, there's so many different things that we can do to bring that level of healing to people before they ever pass that trauma on. We will save millions of people, millions of children before they're ever abused in the first place.
So that's all connected to when you were rescuing the children, it created like a vacuum, and then like they just put more kids in the place, and the numbers are getting more and more. So your question is, how do we fix this? How do we make a change? Like, if we had a time machine, we could, help these people before they ever hurt a child. So now you're more forward thinking to where you're providing support for people who have been victimized. Because as you mentioned, 1/3 of every victim who's sexually assaulted as a child goes on to repeat it. 2/3 don't. So you're trying to help. I love how forward thinking you are. And I was just tying all of that together just
You're
so.
Exactly right. You're exactly right. Yeah. That's the key. And all of them need to be healed, not just the 1/3 that could potentially pass that trauma on,
Right.
but the 2/3 that never pass it on, but they live their lives holding this pain. The average age, Chelsea, that somebody comes out and speaks about being abused as a child, the average age is 52 years old. That's my age. I've got grandkids. I've lived my life. I've built my career. And if somebody is holding on to the pain that long and not releasing it, not letting it go, not talking about it, no wonders we have so many broken people. No wonders that we have so many people that are acting out in anger and verbal abuse, physical abuse, and even sexual abuse of others.
Should we bring back the Me Too movement? And should we do that again? I mean,
the problem is this. The problem is that the Me Too movement is yes, you're bringing out this crap that happened with these people that were never held accountable, and that needs to happen. There needs to be just a full airing out of all of the dirty laundry everywhere, right? That has to be done. But unfortunately, the Me Too movement, the pendulum went too far one way. And anytime a pendulum goes one way like that, boom, it gets pushed the other direction, and it's even worse. And so what you don't want to have is people that are like, hey, yeah, you know what? 18 years ago at a frat party, you got drunk and nobody's there to prove it. You know, you don't know. Did that guy really rape somebody? Did he just slap her on her ass? You know, does he deserve to have his entire last 18 years destroyed because of something that he may or may not have done? So yes, for sure. If there's Weinsteins in the world, they need to be gone to jail. Good people everywhere need to come forward and say, hey, yes, this happened to me. And if there's 4 or 5 women that are all saying, hey, that guy did this to me at that party, whatever else, or you know, in all these situations with these actors and multiple people coming forward, then yes, that truth needs to be known so that people can stop thinking that they're above the law. You know, that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And there, unfortunately, are so many people that feel like they're in a position of absolute power. I'm this movie star, I'm this billionaire, I'm this politician, I'm this whatever, and they feel like their position makes them immune to consequences and causing pain in other people. Right. And so that's the value in something like that movement, is that lots of people were able to come together and say, yeah, this was not appropriate in how this happened. The reality is that everybody needs to let go. They need to bring it out so that people can be held accountable. So especially if they're doing it again. But the truth is, I am a completely different person today than I was 10 years ago. Completely different person today. And not that I was one of those guys that needs a Me Too movement against me, because I never did anything illegal. But from an integrity standpoint, you know what? I was that rich playboy. I had big freaking parties at my house, and you know, there was nothing illegal that was going on at those parties, but it wasn't conducive of a healthy marriage and a healthy relationship and a healthy anything else. And so that energy that I was in when I very first came into the anti-child trafficking world, the reason why my profile worked really well is because I was that rich playboy, right? I could show up with the traffickers and say, yeah, you know, I'll give you $10,000 for that and $5,000, you know, whatever else. And they would see that same energy that they would see in a Jeffrey Epstein. Right? That these wealthy guys that were coming down for this stuff. Now, what happened, because I was a man of God, because of the fact that yeah, I had unhealthy relationships with women in my life. Once I saw what was happening in that darkness, then I realized, wow, it's all connected in some way, right? This is what transformed Paul Hutchinson, is sitting there and seeing this 11-year-old being sold for sex. I'm like, who in the hell would think that that's attractive? Where is this energy coming from? Why in the world does somebody think that that's attractive? And then I looked in the mirror and said, Paul, you don't have a healthy marriage. You know, you don't have, you're fighting about this. You don't have these are all things that you're having these big parties where everybody wants to come to your house. It's all connected. We need to all step back and take a look at ourselves and say, okay, where am I that I'm out of integrity in my life? Where am I that I'm causing pain in other people? Even if it's just pain in being out of integrity in my marriage. You know, I did a guided meditation healing ceremony about 8-9 years ago for myself. And while I was in that space, Chelsea, I felt in every cell in my body, I felt the pain that my children felt when I cheated on their mom. Every cell in my body. And it was heavy and it was dark and it made me cry and I couldn't even breathe. And so all of us have acted in a place that hurt other people at some point in our life. And so all of us can release that and move forward. and say, okay, I'm not that guy anymore. And I can ask for forgiveness from my wife and from other people. And I can come into a place of light and peace and a relationship with God. So that's the key for all of us, wherever on that spectrum we are. And yes, if somebody's crossed that line and they're attracted to children or whatever else, they need to be in a position where they're never going to hurt that child ever. But there's room on the entire spectrum for healing for all of us.
There need to be resources for them too, no doubt.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for feeling open enough to share that. And it's really great when you can see, a man in his like masculine divine power, just like the divine feminine, the divine masculine, and just be able to fully, express yourself, put yourself out there and admit that you've made mistakes too. And I love how you talk about compassion for the pedos. It's terrible. It's like, yes, I want to kill them sometimes. Like I will get you, don't mess with the kids. At the same time, you have messages coming through, like angelic messages from children who've been killed saying, forgive them. Like they're the saddest people in the world. Like they were put through, we never know what someone's been put through in their life, so even actually like we're sending love to the children, all about the message of the children, but we have to love and send compassion and allow for forgiveness for the people who have made mistakes too, including the pedophiles.
Chelsea, I get a lot of pushback on a short video that I did on a gun versus a microphone. And I was asked, Paul, if you were in a room and you had 100 traffickers and you had 100 pedophiles and they were ready to be locked up, and you had a choice, you could have a gun for the next hour with no retribution, or you could have a microphone. What would you take? And my answer is this: I would take the microphone. And that would be the most transformational 60 minutes of their life. I would take them into the pit of hell. I would tell them the stories of what I've seen firsthand, of the pain of these children, of the pain of their families. I would make every one of them cry. And then I would take them out and I would help them see that somewhere inside, there's a crack. There's a crack of goodness somewhere inside of them. And if they could recognize that and see that indeed they are children of God. And they've made some really shitty choices that have caused major pain in the lives of the truly innocent. But they can step forward behind bars, but in a place of finding some sort of redemption. Now, more important than that, what if we could take all of the ones before they ever cross that line?
Right.
Show them compassion, help them to heal. That's what I want to do.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. Wow. This has been absolutely incredible. So I saw that you have a new book coming out. Are you listening? You want to say a couple words about that? I know you have to go in like
have a few books coming out, but the Are You Listening? Every single one of these rescue missions, it wasn't just logic and protocol that helped us find those kids. Again, you can call it God. I call it God. I'm just going to tell you what it is. That's what it is. There's, people call it intuition or, your subconscious mind. No, God cares about these kids and led us every single time. And every single person, every one of us was born with the ability to feel and recognize that spirit of truth. And in this process of getting rid of the trauma, of stepping into this new version of you, of healing, in that process, that relationship with God is so important. And your ability to feel and recognize that spirit of truth in your life will guide you to a life of happiness, a life of abundance, a life of peace that you would never find if you weren't listening.
Awesome. Where can our audience find you?
On all social media, you can find me at liberating.humanity. In fact, you just type in liberating. I'm the first one that comes up there, Liberating Humanity. You can find on my new webpage, just opened up last week, is liberating-humanity. Somebody already had the Liberating Humanity. I need to figure out how to buy that from them. But Liberating Humanity with a hyphen or a dash there will take you a lot of beautiful resources to help people heal and learn more about our mission moving forward. We're going to be adding so much more in there. And you can go directly to the Child Liberation Foundation by going to liberatechildren.org, liberatechildren.org, or liberating-humanity will get you in touch with all of us.
And for his YouTube channel, everybody subscribe to his YouTube channel, Liberating Humanity. And I just thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you so much. This was so important. And I know that there's thousands of people doing research and a lot of people digging in and trying to find out, is it good? Is it bad? Is it infiltrated? This is research, and there's going to be parts of this that are going to be repeated in multiple videos to come, because we made history today here and we're on board for this movement. And I know you have to go. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Chelsea. God bless you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.